We're privileged to host Ray Espinoza, widely recognized as the AppSec CISO. From his early days as a CISO to now, Ray's journey is filled with invaluable lessons, insights, and experiences that have shaped his approach to application security. We'll delve into Ray's initial challenges as a first-time CISO, explore how he aligns AppSec with broader business goals, and uncover his strategies for fostering a security-conscious culture within an organization. We'll also glimpse the CISO's mind on selecting the right tools, engaging with vendors, and the value of mentorship. Whether you're an aspiring CISO or someone passionate about AppSec, this conversation promises a wealth of knowledge. So, gear up for an enlightening discussion with Ray Espinoza.
Keep security top of mind with continuous application security training for your developers. Security Journey offers bite-sized lessons with hands-on interactive training for all roles in the SDLC. Give your admins the ability to use pre-built or custom training paths with easy-to-use tracking and reporting. Visit securityjourney.com to see our solution today.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. This is Chris Romeo. I am the CEO of Davici and also the general partner at Kerr Ventures. So happy to be joined by my good friend Robert, who is on this application security journey with me. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, Robert Hurlbut. I'm a principal application security architect and threat modeling lead at Acquia. And yeah, what a journey, right?
Definitely. I would love to spend about 5 minutes in witty banter, but we have a lot of questions for our guest, Ray Espinoza, today. So, Ray, let's just jump right into your security origin story. How'd you get started in security? Take us back in time, tell us that story, and then bring us forward to where you are today.
Absolutely. So I had the honor and privilege of being at eBay in the very early days when people actually used eBay to buy stuff online before Amazon had Prime. It's almost amazing to even imagine at that point. But I started there very early in the year 2000 on the infrastructure side for the eBay.com. Worked from engineer to team lead to manager. And after about 6 years of doing front-end infrastructure for eBay.com, I felt like it was a bit of like this Groundhog's Day type of effect where every day was the same. We always had these small outages or issues and just the variables changed. And it was right around that time that eBay had hired its first CISO. And one of my buddies that I had worked with who had been on the information security team at the time had approached me and said, Ray, we're building a security team now that we have our CISO. You have all the relationships across the company, you're a friendly guy. You understand how production works beginning to end. We can teach you all the security stuff. Would you come and build incident response and security monitoring for us? We feel that your background in operations and availability and problem management, all of that would be extremely helpful to doing incident response. And at first, it took me like 30 seconds. And in my head, I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted, because I had read some hacking exposed books and I thought security is so glamorous and so cool. And there's definitely something there. And I was like, but do I want to change? Yes, definitely. Let's do it. And it took me, again, about 30 seconds of internal dialogue. And so that was really my cut into information security. And what an awesome ride that was. Having spent 10 years at eBay, having an opportunity to build incident response from scratch. We had an awesome partner. We worked with KPMG at the time as well. And that enabled me to put some structure in some place, filling out what I had known and what I had done on the operations side and applying that to security. And then learning from that, bringing on an MSSP to do like first line triage and monitoring, and then building security operations center at eBay. And then continuing to expand off of that. But that was really my run into security, and it just started with infrastructure.
Who was that eBay CISO? I swear
Dave
I've
Cullinane.
heard. Say it again.
Dave Cullinane.
Okay, I think I've heard him speak at different events, and I just couldn't remember who it was. I'm like, I've heard the eBay's first CISO speak. So, okay, very cool.
There was a few other folks who had a similar type of role, but they weren't necessarily given that title. But yeah, I mean, when I started, there were like 300 employees at eBay, and when I left, there were like 14,000. So it was, huge growth during that 10-year journey.
Now, in your role as a CISO today, do you take lessons learned all the way back from what Dave was doing at eBay? Like, was there like, is that the foundation of your CISO career today?
It's interesting. I feel like I take little bits from so many different leaders that I've had along the way, and yet I still made my own mistakes. And some of them were sort of guidance and whatnot that I was warned about. And at the time, I felt like I was doing the right thing. But I learned lots of great things from Dave in the very early days around, being able to get executive team buy-in and how to drive communication, really how to build a high performing and high caliber team. And I look back at that time, I see like, my goodness, there's many folks that were part of that eBay security team are, a large part of like who's who in security now that have gone on to do some really cool things. But I spent time 4 years at Cisco Systems working with folks like Gavin Reed and other folks. And, again, it's really those little bits that I had learned along the way. My first CISO level role was over at Proofpoint, and that was in 2015. I still had all these grand visions of how things were going to work. And it was a really interesting journey for me in that I'm a clear, honest, transparent guy. I like to go in and just say what I mean and expect that everybody there in the room is going to have that same level of buy-in, of like, they're just going to say what they mean. We're going to be honest. We're going to be transparent. And how naive sort of looking back, but it was such, a great experience for me in just, making mistakes and making assumptions and really having to learn along the way. I mean, one of the first things that I can think of where, was such like a big miss for me is, as I go around and I'm trying to build relationships and get to meet each of these different general managers and different leaders in each of these different business units, I would always ask, what do you need from my organization and how can I be of service to you? And having that conversation and feeling like I walked away with a decent level of understanding of what they needed. And whether it was what they wanted me to hear or it was just what I had heard as a part of the conversation, one of the first failings that I had was to go back and to validate, you know what, Chris, this is what I heard you say, and this is what I'm planning on doing. How does that sound? Are we still aligned? Did I hear you right? It was basically like, the three of us have a conversation. I walk away thinking, here's what we're going to do. And they're not going to hear about it again until we're in front of all the execs in the leadership team meeting. And I'm going to talk about my overall strategy, only for them to be like, that's not going to work for me. That's not what I signed up for. This is not going to work. And so that was one of like the first early failings that I've since taken with me, is just not circling back and really not making sure and validating that what I had heard and what my plan of action was, that it's still aligned to A, what do they care about? And B, it's going to move the needle tangibly for us as a part of our overall strategy. But that was one of the, when you're standing on a stage and you figure out you got it wrong, and the amount of heat and pressure that you feel from other folks in the room, it was a teachable and growing moment for me, for sure.
So, yeah, you only have those happen one time in most cases, though, because it hurts so much. It's like, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to make sure I have the solution. So I've always wanted to ask a CISO this question. So this is a new segment called Ask a CISO. I just made up on the fly here.
Awesome.
How much of a CISO's job is security versus everything else that you have to deal with? Like, I've always, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you my kind of imaginary answer, because I've never been a CISO. I've worked with CISOs and whatnot, but just I've never been in the role. And I would guess it's about 50-50. And that is a complete guess. Now, Robert, what's your guess? How much time does before we go to Ray in our Ask a CISO segment here, how much time do you think CISOs spend on security versus all the other things they have to do?
I'd like to think maybe even 70-30, but yeah, probably reality is more like 50-50 or sometimes 40-60 because, in terms of interacting with others in the business and so on. But I'm interested in knowing as well. All
right, Ray, enlighten us.
So I'm going to caveat this and say that it's slightly dependent on the size and maturity of the company. I've been at pre-seed or seed startups all the way up to extremely large Fortune 3 companies, and and it's quite a bit different there. So I would say it's probably closer to 50-50 on average, but maybe most of the time even 40-60. As a CISO and a leader, I found that if I surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than I am or just awesome in different ways, we're collectively stronger as a group, but it enables me an opportunity to get out of the way and let the magic happen from them, be here to clear roadblocks. But a lot of those roadblock clearing and strategy and driving roadmap and evangelism and whatnot, I don't know how much I would consider that, security as a whole. And again, if you said how much time hands-on keyboard security, is it, I would say, well, in my current company where we're a Series A startup, it's probably like 70-30, 60-40 or so, but quite a bit less, and some of those larger companies, just because there is so much that's required for the organization, the security organization to succeed. It requires lots of relationship building and relationship maintenance and driving communication and seeking feedback and a lot of those soft skills that really are required to get buy-in or to validate that we're continuing to win and move the needle. I don't know how much of that is considered, real security, but it's 100% necessary because ask me how I know. When you don't validate and you don't have those conversations, you don't build those relationships in time of need. It's really tough when you try to dial your lifeline and nobody's there to answer.
Yeah, and I guess you really just need enough security knowledge and experience as a CISO to be able to interpret whether somebody's telling you the truth or not. Is that would you agree with that statement?
I think there's definitely, you need to have a BS meter and try to understand if folks are trying to prolong or delay or trying using lots of words to try to say like, I got a little busy, or maybe I was a little lazy, or something's not really working, or we can't really support you in this way because of all these other things that you just don't understand. So I think having requisite understanding around what we're trying to accomplish, what the problems really are, and what that goes into, like having a background on the infrastructure side, which included some network, earlier in my career as well. It was great in having some of those conversations because then you can kind of spot like, oh, we can't do this. We're taking this maintenance window. We're doing these things. And I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. Like maybe things have changed in the time since I did it, but it's still these things, right? Yeah, and so having the ability to kind of wade through some of that, there's always going to be pieces of that. But, again, I'm a big believer. If I can spend time investing in building relationships and getting back to the core of who I am is just being honest and transparent. And let's be real. You have things that you care about. I have things that I care about. I know that we can't do everything. So what makes sense for the business for us to accomplish together? And can we align on that? And then we can be transparent with everybody else around that decision that we made. Getting there, I feel is what really matters, but also being able to challenge each other too, of like, yeah, that doesn't seem off, or that doesn't seem right, or, come on, Robert, are you serious? Like I know you're telling me this, but I'm not picking it up. So you definitely have some of those, but those relationships, that's where they really come into play.
I think in this conversation, I'd be the one telling you the story. It would be like, Robert, give me the straight answer here on what this guy's got to say to me here. So, but I've also heard you talk a number of times already here about your team and the power of your team. And I guess if you have a strong team that you've built around you with knowledge and experience in security and technical ability, you don't have to be the expert anymore.
Absolutely.
Because you trust them to be your eyes and ears, to be the people that are out there making things happen from a technical perspective. And they likely have the knowledge and experience to be able to do the deep technical things. But by having them and having a high performing team, you can work on those relationships and connecting with other parts of the business and buy-in and communication and metrics and all the things that define your success, while still letting them do the things that maybe earlier in your career you thought were the fun parts of doing this stuff, but you can enable and empower other people to be successful.
That's 100% right. And really, I mean, when you think about surrounding yourself with senior level people, principal level people, that's where, you validate their assumptions, you make sure that we're aligned on where we're headed, and then again, get out of the way, clear those roadblocks. But it's also extremely important to continue to develop your bench strength, right? You're bringing along, interns or new college grads or folks earlier in their tenure, maybe not necessarily even in their career, but you're still providing them just enough guidance and support where maybe they can make some of those mistakes, which I think we all agree sometimes are pretty helpful in overall development without like a catastrophic failure. But, so there's times, the new college grads or interns, you're very pointed. This is the expectation. This is the outcome here. So I believe that you can get there. If you think there's another way, fantastic. Let's talk about it. I'll let you know if I agree, and we'll continue to go. So it's, it's almost like parenting. I have 4 kids, 2 in their, mid-20s and 1 in high school and 1 in elementary school. And they're all a bit different in the relationship and their personalities and how they need to receive feedback. And I find that very similar to how, I've had to lead different teams of, you treat them slightly different of what's really going to hit home for them. And, having to work through a problem or having to work through some feedback, the approach, is slightly different in the way that it's delivered. And, I found management and leading very similar to that, and just leading with a ton of empathy and honesty up front. And then, being able to call BS when I feel like it's not there and we need to move past it.
Yeah. And Robert, I swear we're going to get to the application security strategy question. That's coming up next. I got one more based on something you said, though, because you were talking about bench strength and interns and growing your pipeline. I'm going to assume this is kind of a pipeline, a talent pipeline, I guess, coming into your organization. Very seldom do I hear people talk about that and have a strategy. I mean, everybody would tell us if they were here, oh yeah, we do. We have a strategy for that. But you're talking about it, and it's and the way you're talking about your team and all these other things, it's making me think you have a more in-depth approach to this. And so are you kind of thinking about the bench on like a year-to-year perspective about how you're going to grow the team and grow capabilities, and you're bringing some percentage of new people are coming in from college? Like, tell us more about that strategy, because the way you're talking about it, I think there's more to it that people can really learn from.
And so I'll caveat this with, how we're currently operating at, our small startup of 30 people where I joined at employee 11. We think about it slightly different because the needs of the business are different. And every single individual hire is so much more impactful. But if I take it back to, when I was at Cobalt.io, or when I was at Cisco or even at Proofpoint, understanding where does the business want to get in the next 2 years, and being able to chart a path to ensure that we can support the business to get there allows us to say, okay, that's the end goal. Now let's work backwards from there. And what do we need from a resourcing perspective? Does a business want us to be somewhere where we feel like we don't have the expertise to be able to deliver? Or is there a large gap? Is there a large item on the risk register that we feel like there's no way we can help the business win and get to where they want to get to, and have like this risk, this gap, this issue that we haven't been able to address? And so thinking about filling that gap, I think is critical. And so I end up thinking about that really on like an annual basis. We'll deliver on a quarterly basis, but think about like the year and staffing and whatnot on an annual basis, so that you can make small pivots and changes as the landscape changes, as the business changes. I was at Medallia prior to joining my current startup, and I didn't expect we would get acquired by private equity, a few months into my tenure there. And so that drastically changed, our overall strategy and approach. So those types of things definitely come into play. But when you take a step back, you can't just hire. As awesome as it is to surround yourself with a bunch of super ninjas, it's equally important to remember that, hey, we were all those young folks or making a career switch or had this, knowledge and expertise, but weren't security experts by any means, but we were hungry for that knowledge. How do we continue to grow folks into that role and allow them, so as our senior folks, maybe they move on to become CISOs, maybe they move on to an additional technical path, or they just decide to do something different. The business isn't falling over because we had one critical person and we weren't thinking about, redundancy and overall backfill. But again, if we take a step back and thinking about that, it's recognizing you can't hire all senior. And I've also had the privilege of hiring folks directly out of college or having folks come in for their internship and just be completely blown away by either their technical aptitude or their ability to learn, and maybe even more important, thinking outside the box. I think one of the best hires that I made of a new college grad who I continue to be just wowed back at Cisco. He was maybe it was RIT, or there was some very prestigious and awesome college that he came from. But like he just continued to deliver and continue to learn and continue to exceed our overall expectations for somebody who was a new college grad. And sometimes you find those folks along the way and you want to nurture them and help put them in a path so they continue to feel challenged, and there's training and they have opportunities so they stay. And just thinking about it in that same direction. And maybe not everybody comes along like that one individual, but surely you can continue to hire folks, continue to mold them, provide them support and guidance and training, and watch them grow into these other roles. I have another person who, I came in as an intern, and then I was able to hire as a new college grad and recently became a manager. And the dad in me wants to help celebrate some of that. I get tears a little bit even, when we had that conversation, but it's awesome to be able to think, you can give somebody an opportunity and drive them to success. So it still comes back to business outcomes and how do we best support that? And then, what's my salary cap that I get to work with, using that sports analogy, and how do I, gamble or kind of bank on some of these younger folks? If we can surround them with the right amount of support, we can grow them to be, what the business needs.
So you mentioned several things there that kind of related to this next question, but how do you align your application security strategy with the broader business objectives of the organization?
A lot of it comes down to having conversations with the different product teams around how do they view bugs, and how does work come in and how does work get out, and what's the most impactful thing to them while they're trying to develop new product. And again, this was something that I ended up learning, during those early proof point days and making all these assumptions of like, you all care about security, right? So clearly we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but getting a good understanding of if we identify vulnerabilities after a product shift, and we find it in a pen test or it comes through our bug bounty program, how impactful is that to the business? And depending on that, can I sell you on the ability for us to go beyond some of the compliance-based trainings of ensuring that our developers know how to develop securely, and they know what a fix is for some of these vulnerabilities that are coming in, and can we get iteratively better over time in developing code more securely, both from a training perspective, from additional tooling during that development process, so that we can limit the amount of interrupt that the product team experiences while they're trying to deliver features overall. And so that was ultimately what I came to get much better buy-in of like, I want you to have less bugs, less security bugs that are coming in after a product shift. So what are the best ways that we can do that? And then being pragmatic from there. I made the mistake again early on of like, let's do all the things. Like let's get security tools plugged into the IDE. Let's make sure we do training. Let's add security tests to the pipeline, and trying to do all of those and having like developers basically call a strike and say like, we can't operate under these conditions. We need things to change. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of pull things back and say, well, what are the things that you care about? What are you incentivized by, and how do I align our security needs as close as I can to those first? And, that only goes so far. And then from there of like, well, we all care about security. We care about not being on front page of the, Wall Street Journal or those things. Now, these are some of the things that we can practically do. And if we roll them out in phases and we validate that they're having the intended results, can I continue to get buy-in, and can we make iterative improvement over time through there? And so that's what started to help me really move the needle on getting AppSec much more of an accepted program overall with different product teams, is kind of leading from there. And then just being smart about it, getting developer feedback early on of like, we're rolling out this thing and here's what we need you to do. We've rolled out this thing. How is it working for you? And how can we make it better for you? Recognizing that the business needs to win. Devs need to write code. But what I found many times, a lot of them are like, I would love to write secure code. Sure, I've just never been given the opportunity or not really given the training. Can we do this without adding huge amounts of overhead? Or maybe bite-sized chunks worse. What do you all think? And not making those assumptions for them, continuing to get some of that feedback. And then, building programs like security champions and whatnot, those are all things that continue to reinforce and reiterate. But gosh, again, it kind of goes back to those central themes of communication, buy-in, validation, and then just being pragmatic with our approach to rolling out new capabilities.
Yeah, and I've experienced the same thing. Developers are craftspeople at the end of the day. They don't want to write bad stuff. They don't want to write buggy stuff. Absolutely. They take pride, like I mean, there are probably some people that don't care as developers, but in general, the people that I've worked with, the people that I've known, they take pride in what they build, and if you provide them with something they can use to improve their output and their product, then they almost always get behind that idea, because they, like I said, they want to be the best. They want to build the best, and they don't want to be known with something that was insecure.
Absolutely. Well, I will add just one small point, that there are some who say exactly what you said. I care about what I write. I stand by what I write, but they're not incentivized to do other things. Like if their quarterly bonus is tied to these specific deliverables or these specific goals, and none of these happen to be security, then it's tough to get that buy-in. I've had very tough but honest conversations of like, I would love to help, but this is, if I do this, it takes away from my opportunity of getting 100% of my bonus. So then that's an opportunity for me to go and say, how do we get this as a goal that is also included? And once, I've had that fight at a couple of places of taking that up to either the CEO or, GM of a product group, of how do we get this as a goal that people actually have to work towards? Here's how it affects the business positively, and here's how your folks can gain buy-in. I've had to go that route as well, because many times they're like, I would love to help, but I can't.
Yeah. And we're putting them in a challenging situation.
Absolutely. Which like I have a lot of empathy for.
I can take my kids to Disney World, or I can fix your security bugs. Those are my choices. Like, I don't blame them. I mean, that's
absolutely.
I get why they're saying it's not their fault. It's the system's fault that it was set up in such a way to not make security an incentive. So I think that's something that sounds like, you've had some good success in approaching that and adjusting, getting those policies changed by
after a lot of failure and a lot of wrong turns, finding that right channel that seems to address that definitely helped. Absolutely.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about tools and technology, because I'm always curious, given that you hear stories about the average CISO has, I don't know how many different tools and technologies they claim now in the surveys, but it's never like the average CISO has 3 tools. It's always like the average CISO has 47 different tools in their tool belt that they use to improve security or whatever. So, like, from your perspective, how are you evaluating? How are you choosing the right tools for your organization?
I've learned to adopt an approach, and I can't remember if it was just prescribed to me or how it really came about. But ultimately, trying to tie back, what problem are we trying to solve? Every tool or every new piece of technology or every dollar spent towards security should have a reason why. I should be able to stand in front of any sort of committee, the ELT, the board, and said, we made this investment because of this problem, and we were measuring success in this way, and here's how we know whether it's working or not. And so those are the things that I've worked towards ever since kind of picking through some of that, of working towards basically a business proposal and a write-up. But it usually starts with, there's a problem we need to solve, or we don't have anything and this is green field, and the business wants us to get to a SOC 2 Type 2. And so here's the pieces of technology that are going to be required for us to meet some of those controls. And so it really depends on what that driver is, but ultimately it's still the same. What problem are we solving? How is this solution going to fit? What other solutions are we looking at? What does success look like when we're done with an evaluation? How do we believe this is the right solution that's going to work? And then how are we going to continue to measure success? If we're going to put a WAF in place and we expect it to block, X percentage of attacks or categories of attacks, et cetera, we should continue to measure that. So by the time, 6 months in, 3 months in, I can stand up and somebody says, hey, you're spending $500,000 with insert your WAF provider here, are they actually doing anything? And I've been that guy in the room to be like, I think so, but we're not 100% sure. And now I've since learned, yes, here's how we were measuring it, and here's what the impact has been compared to last year or whatever. And so that's the overall type of approach. I love looking at it also from like a risk register perspective. And so we're really solving problems that are driving real risk towards the organization. Again, those other ones are compliance driven. And then that last piece really ends up coming down to, is there something new, cool, and innovative that I don't have to wait to be in an accident, down the road, and I know it's going to happen. I don't have to wait to get there to realize I need to make a change or do something different. And, I have the opportunity. I'm an advisor for Wild Ventures and for a few other VCs. And so that gives me an opportunity to talk to, founders who haven't even developed a product yet, but they're looking at solving specific problems, or maybe they've come up with an overall approach. They want some validation. That's afforded me an opportunity to be like, wow, there's been like very little innovation in this space, and you all are onto something. I think I want to be a design partner. I want us to be able to solve this problem because I can think about it of, publicly traded CISO and the problems that I've had in previous life, and then what I also need now. And so some of that is also sort of opportunistic in a way of, big problems that many of us have where there's not great solutions out there. So it ends up being sort of a combination of those three. But still, even if I'm going to bring in anything as a design partner, it still comes down to, why, what problem does it solve? How are we going to measure? And then we should be able to have the data to be able to tell the tale. It can't be anecdotal. Ask me how I know. I've learned that lesson.
Yeah, and I think that's a formula for many things beyond tools, right? Of understanding why, and then understanding how you're going to measure the impact, and then being able to report on that over a period of time. And justify whatever the decision was that you made. I mean, that's a framework for solving a lot of different things in the business world specifically.
Absolutely. And being honest when something doesn't work out. We had everything we thought lined up and it's just not meeting, or the problem changed, or we didn't understand the problem. Again, leading with a lot of honesty of here's the assumptions we made, here's what the data told us, and here's what it ended up coming out to. And so this was a miss. And so here's now we're going to pivot and we're going to address it in this way. Again, I find just being honest and not trying to make a bunch of excuses, it leads to, a lot more credibility and a lot more support overall, because everybody knows nothing is perfect and no one's going to be right 100% of the time.
And you're not offering that answer of, well, it just felt like it was going to be the right solution. It feels like it's the right solution. I mean, how many times in our careers have we heard people say that though? And it's like, now I think all of us have been around the block enough times where we're just going to look at them and say, wait, what? Come on. You can't feel like this is going to be a solution. There has to be some data that's backing up whatever you're trying to say. There's no feelings. Like, feelings are great, but there's no feelings when we're making a purchasing decision.
Absolutely.
So talked about tooling and picking tools and so forth, but thinking about the other direction coming from outside, so a vendor who's wanting to pitch their products, what's the right way for them to do that, to approach a CISO and pitch their own products?
So first, I'll say there's probably not one right way that I can talk about. A few ways that folks have been able to reach me. One, I'll also caveat and say, I'm now at a security, provider, and I also have at numerous times in my career, I have a lot more empathy for folks, reaching out and being on the other side of the table of trying to, establish contact and gain some level of credibility and whatnot. It's a lot of what I talk to my go-to-market team, here at our current company is how do you build trust? And so something that's continued to work with me really over the years is somebody taking the time to really meet and not be so focused on just making the sell, but trying to understand, are there problems that I'm willing to talk about? And are they actually willing to listen? Or are they so excited that, they're waiting for me to finish my sentence so they can talk about their product and be, right in there. But, if those folks who've taken the time to either maybe slow play building a relationship, those are ones that even whether they're still at that same company or they move on to somewhere else, if they've taken that time to just check in, ask questions, be honest, be professional, those are ones that I will typically make time to continue to have conversations with. There are others who, will just say, hey, no pressure. Would you invest 15 minutes and then be honest and schedule 15 minutes of like, we'd love your feedback on just the approach. And if this is something you're interested in, great. If not, that's still okay as well. I've had some of those of like, we want some validation. And if it's at an area where I've experienced pain or I have deep expertise or like I mentioned before, I'm just sure that, this area is ripe for innovation, I may take the time to, to learn. But there's times where I'm just busy, like I'm busy with the day job, busy with the family. I also coach high school football, this doesn't afford me lots of time to give it away. And so, sometimes I'm trying to be honest, and I try to be quick. If somebody reaches out and they say, hey, we want your time, it's just not a great time. I'm really busy, but maybe come back in a few months. And, I've had folks, be like not all that awesome even with that, response from me. And they're like, oh, well, clearly you don't care. Or, they say things like that because they're upset, they're not going to get the meeting or whatever. That's definitely one quick way to get blackballed. And sadly, I've had things like that happen. So, being honest, being clear about the value and asking, for time, and just being respectful that now may not be a great time. It may be a great time for you because you're trying to generate opportunities and you have a quota to hit, but that may not mean that it's something that I have a strong interest in now, and just being respectful of that. And the folks who've done that, I typically make time for them afterwards, especially if they follow up when I told them, hey, it's early summer, and maybe in early September, it'll be a better time for us to maybe have this conversation. And I may revisit and say, sorry, I got to punt one more time. Or you know what? I'll take that 30 minutes because I'm still interested and I want to understand and learn more. But folks who are professional, who knew that would be the secret sauce of like, hey, be professional when you reach out. That tends to be, the real big, differentiator. But the ones who have sold me like big are ones who they've worked to build a relationship, and again, they've moved on. And every time they call or every time they reach out, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm gonna take that meeting and listen. But yeah, that seems to resonate pretty well, of just being professional and being honest.
And that's really helpful because often vendor representatives, we only are shown examples of the worst case scenarios of what happens. Because there's a number of, and we've all seen them, there's a number of the posts will go by on LinkedIn and you're never going to believe this company did this and whatnot. And it's like, these are people that are trying to feed their families too. Like they're, they're not, and so I love what you're saying here about if somebody approaches you, they're professional, they're respectful, then you will return the same favor to them. It's only when somebody does something that is just off the wall and is not respecting you, not really caring about you, is when it's going to be more of a challenge. I think we just need more conversations about the right ways for people to do this, because these are people too on the other side of the phone. It's not AI. If it's AI reaching out, then you can yell at them, sure, but it's not AI. These are people.
Absolutely. And I have so much more empathy now, supporting a go-to-market team or even at previous organizations and understanding what they're trying to get to. Many times I had one tell me, early on of like, I wish somebody would just respond and say, no, thank you, or, it's not a great time. And so I make it like, if you reach out, I'm going to respond to you and say this works or it doesn't. I'm going to give you that 15 seconds of a response, because I have respect for you as another professional, who's trying to work that hustle. And I've had folks be like, oh, but maybe I can. I'm like, again, I appreciate the hustle, but it's not a good time. And it's usually, and as long as they leave it there, I'm fine to leave it there as well and pick it up and revisit. But I don't assume negative intent, or, maybe I have a larger amount of patience than others, but just that understanding that they're trying to feed their families. You said it really well. That's a good perspective to have. I
love that. I appreciate the hustle. It's a really nice way of saying, I'm not having this conversation now. And nice try on and I appreciate the fact that you reached out a second time, but it's as I'm kind of unpacking that in my head, I'm like, that's a really nice way of saying, this is the last time you're going to hear from me if you don't read between the lines about what I'm trying to tell you here. Appreciate the hustle. Reach out to me in 3 months and we'll talk again.
100%. Just put on a t-shirt or something.
Do you think, and this is, we've been talking a lot about, your role as a CISO and some of the things that you've learned, but do you recommend that other folks strive to become a CISO? And if so, do you have some practical tips that they could use to prepare themselves?
I believe that if somebody wants to continue to grow in their career, there's more than one way to grow as a security practitioner. There's not the only path. If you want to grow, you grow into a CISO and that's it. So I've been really big at some of the organizations that I've been at of, we need to expand the technical track. We may have somebody who's like a principal architect and we need to work towards like, a principal fellow or something else. Somebody should be able to make their living. If they love being a technologist and they want to be, deep in the weeds, we should support them to be able to go down that path, or to find success and be able to and enable them and support them in moving laterally and trying new things within their career. So that's sort of like my first thing of like, you don't have to be a CISO when you grow up if you're in security, but if you strive to do that, well, one I would say is that, do you genuinely care about other people's success and helping others succeed? Is that something that will bring you joy? And if the answer is no to either of those two, then I'd probably say, maybe that's not like the right path for you to go because, there's no one way or right way, to do this. But I find being a servant leader to folks within the organization tends to yield, the highest output and the highest outcome and the best team morale. And so I usually start there. But if they do have an interest, then it becomes, well, especially if it's somebody within my staff, can I provide opportunities and position you to drive and oversee a program to gain some level of visibility with the executive team to understand what the business outcome is that they're expecting and how do we translate that into deliverables that the team can execute on and whatnot. So a lot of that continues to become, how do you set folks up for success and how do you give them experiences so when the time calls and that seat's vacant, that they're a viable candidate and a viable option to be able to step into that role. Many of us who are CISOs weren't born CISOs, and so somebody took a chance on us to be able to step in and to drive and be successful. And so I think there's ways that folks can continue to support and do that. So that goes back to if somebody wants to, if you want to be a CISO, fantastic, do it. There's many organizations that need high quality security guidance, and it should be talked about at the executive and the board level, and help somebody get there. But also understand too, it comes with, sometimes a lot of stress and, there's a lot of responsibility and whatnot. And so I try to just be real, with folks who have asked me this question or say, hey, I want to go and do this thing. What do I need to do? Or what should I do? Or what should I be thinking about? And a lot of times I just lay it out. Here's all the things that I've learned along the way. And if you still have a strong interest, fantastic. I would love to help support you in any way that I can. But I say the same thing as somebody says, hey, I think I want to be a manager. It goes down kind of that same route, that same thinking of, getting joy from helping others succeed.
And that really leads us into the final question before the lightning round. And that's in regards to mentoring. Hearing you talk about your teams and the way you care for them. And I know you're a super mentor person already, but let's talk about your philosophy behind this and whatever you want to talk to us about in regards to mentoring.
I think it's super important to give back. I've had many folks throughout my career invest their personal time to help me develop, to answer my questions, provide me guidance, coaching, and support. And I felt like it was my calling to help others in the same way. I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood. Didn't have a ton, and just so many things along the way where I felt like others positively impacted my development to help me get to, where I am, even as a, young child and, up until, adult. And then even still, having reached what maybe some might say is like the pinnacle of your career, when you've made it as a CISO, where do you go? Then I found like, wow, I really need executive coaching because not having graduated from college, and being a teenage parent, I took the long road or a little bit of a harder road to get to where I am. But the first time I walked into a board meeting or an executive leadership team meeting, and I was the only person who didn't have a college degree, or I was the only person who was different looking than everybody else. How do I project confidence, and how do I find success going in that way? And so there's absolutely needs and ways to be able to support and get out there from coaching, exec coaches and mentoring, et cetera. I'm a board member for AppSec CISO, which helps folks of Latin descent identify that there are opportunities in cybersecurity and help provide some mentorship. I've had the privilege of mentoring with Black girls in cyber and helping, women transition into cyber and help support them in identifying roles and helping them find success and get training so that they can be successful there as well. And I mentor with Everwise and Upnotch. Again, it's if I can be of value and of service to somebody, gosh dang it, that just feels good. And I want to be able to do that. And it doesn't mean that whatever I say is solid gold, but sometimes that they come up with a scenario or they're dealing with something that I've experienced well, and I've had some level of hardship, and I can provide at least an approach or some level of guidance or something that may help them through, or books that I've read to help me communicate better or have better executive presence. And so I'm a big believer in giving back, and I really do believe that if you help others and you can make a positive impact in one person, who knows what they're going to be able to do for somebody else. And if we all did that, I hate to get all sort of kumbaya on this and whatnot, but gosh, if we all gave like a little bit to help somebody else find success without expecting anything in return, other than maybe the world's a better place, that's pretty dang good. And it's a lot of the same reason why I coach football.
we could all sit here and list the people who got us to where we are today. Nobody, there is no such thing as somebody who's completely self-made. Like I just sat in a room and read books and watched YouTube videos, and then I went and I got the job the next day, or whenever. Like that is everybody has leaned into different people in their career to help them learn things or get pointed in the right direction. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I'm the same way. Like I mentor lots of different startups now because I've gone through bootstrapping a startup to exit through M&A and everything. Like I'm happy to talk to any startups out there that I can just offer some advice to. And I do like open hours at RSA and Black Hat and just tell people you can schedule 30 minutes. I'm here. We'll sit down. You can ask me whatever you want, and I'll try to help you. And the same thing with individuals. Like I think that, to your point, like this is such an important thing, and it's an obligation for all of us that have been around for a while. Like we need to do this. Like it is our responsibility. And if we don't, the next generation is not going to be able to exceed what we've done and really push themselves forward. And so it's our responsibility, as some of us are in the upper parts of our career. Robert, not Robert, that's me too. Robert and I are the same here, but like we have a responsibility to do that. So
absolutely.
All right, we got to do the lightning round here. I've been waiting for a long time to hear Ray's answers to the lightning round, and then he blew me away with all these other things, and I kept asking him more questions, but I want to hear the lightning round. So Robert, take us into that.
All right. So we have 3 questions. First one is, what's your most controversial opinion on application security, and why do you hold that view?
I'd say AppSec is not hard. I think we can find ways to make it simple. We can manage expectations and be a little bit patient with how we roll it out. But I've heard it is AppSec's too complex, too hard, too difficult to do or to do well, and I think that's false.
Okay. Number 2, what would it say if you could display a single message on a billboard at the RSA or Black Hat conference?
Give back to others.
Love it. And then final question, number 3, what's your top book recommendation, and why do you find it valuable?
So I have 2. The one that I felt was so impactful for me that when I had read is Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink, taking his sealed approach to communication and just owning the outcome and how do you drive improvement. I'm very big and will over pivot on owning. And so I had at one point made it sort of mandatory reading for my leaders. I mean, I have to subscribe to it, but getting a stronger understanding of how I work is key. So I recommend that highly for anyone. There was another one around executive presence communication, and the author, it escapes me, but there was a period of time, and I talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and not having the confidence and stepping into a room where others that didn't see me as a peer, and still being able to speak authoritatively and confidently to ultimately win their trust and their buy-in. I think that's hugely undervalued right now, and I know there's many folks that have been in that situation where they can benefit from it. And having tactical tips to be able to say, when you approach, do X, Y, and Z. When you go in, you understand, make sure you have specific piece of data that you want to hit home and stand a specific spot and, figure out what works for you in the way that you can project the most confidence. I don't think many folks talk about that a lot, but I felt like it made a big difference for me in being able to just, gain some credibility, especially if you're new in an organization.
All right. Well, we've come towards the end of the conversation, Ray, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to share a key takeaway, a call to action. Is there something you want the audience to do as a result of our conversation here?
If you have any questions on talking security, you want to talk about mentorship, you're looking for guidance or support, feel free to reach out. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as well as on Twitter at Ray Espinoza Sec. If I can be of service to you or point you in the right direction, or maybe there's a match and there's a way that I can invest some time and help you, definitely reach out. And I would encourage other leaders and mentors as well. And I apologize for being, pedantic on the topic, but gosh, if somebody can reach out and be benefited by the experiences that you've had, see if you can make just that little bit of time to be able to help them out. It may go a long way.
Ray, thanks for joining the Application Security Podcast, for sharing all of your wisdom and lessons learned and best practices and just passions. It was so great to hear this, and we can hear it come out in your voice. I can tell your team likes working for you, and people are going to be looking for job openings wherever you are. I can tell just by listening to you. So thanks for sharing that with our audience.
Chris, Robert, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.